All right, let's jump right into one of the most intense, just explosive moments in the entire book of Acts. We're going to see how a peaceful religious observance in Jerusalem completely blows up into a murderous riot. This is the story of how the Apostle Paul's mission gets changed forever, not by a sermon, but by a single lie that almost gets him killed.
Just try to imagine the sound of that. An entire crowd screaming together, not just for someone to be arrested, but for them to be executed. Get rid of him! That's the sound of pure, raw hatred, and it is all pointed at one man. The air is just thick with fury, and Paul is right in the eye of the storm.
So you have to ask, how did it get to this point? I mean, how does a guy participating in a simple purification vow at the temple suddenly find himself being beaten to death by a mob just moments later? That's the big question we're going to unpack right now. We're going to trace this whole thing from the spark of a lie to the brink of an execution, and then see how it all gets flipped on its head. So this whole thing kicks off not with an action, not with a punch, but with a word, a lie. And this wasn't some random outburst, okay? This was a calculated, malicious accusation designed to cause the most outrage possible in the most sensitive place you can imagine. So who lit the fuse? Well, the accusers were Jews from the province of Asia. Yep, the same region where Paul's ministry had been incredibly successful. These were his old enemies. They spot him in the temple and they see their chance. They use this super inflammatory language to turn the entire crowd against him right then and there.
In their strategy? Oh, it was dangerously simple. The accusation was that Paul brought a Gentile, a Greek, into the inner court of the temple, which was a huge deal, a capital offense. But what was the reality? They had only seen him walking around the city with Trophimus, who happened to be a Gentile. They took that little fact, made a massive false assumption, and weaponized it into a charge of sacrilege to get the crowd going.
And wow, did their tactic work. The lie spread like wildfire. The Bible says the whole city was aroused. People came running from everywhere. They grabbed Paul, they dragged him out of the temple, and they just started beating him. The intent was clear. They were trying to kill him. The scene is just pure, unadulterated chaos. Now, just as it looks like it's all over for Paul, just as the mob is about to land the final blows, the story takes this incredible turn. And this isn't just a lucky break. The arrival of Roman soldiers here is a critical moment of rescue, and it's framed not as a coincidence, but as pure providence. I mean, just look at how close this was. The beating has already started. But somehow, word gets to the Roman commander, this guy Claudius Lysias, and he doesn't wait around. He grabs his soldiers and they run straight to the scene. And then, that final moment, the instant the rioters see the Romans, they stop. Just like that. Roman authority rolls in and saves Paul's life in the absolute nick of time. So why did the commander act so fast? Well, it was his job. He was there to maintain the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For Rome, putting down a riot was just another day at the office, standard procedure. But what was just a routine act of law and order for them became the very instrument of God's intervention, saving Paul for the mission that was still ahead of him. So, in the middle of all this chaos, the commander arrests Paul and has him bound with 2 chains. Now, for the Romans, this is just standard procedure for a dangerous prisoner. But for us, reading the story, it's this stunning moment where prophecy is fulfilled. Just a few days earlier, the prophet Agabus had predicted that the Jews in Jerusalem would bind Paul and hand him over. See? Even his capture was part of a bigger plan. Okay, so Paul is now in Roman custody, but he is far from safe. The action now shifts from the temple courtyard to the steps of the Roman barracks, and this is where we see Paul do something incredible. He turns his moment of greatest danger into an unexpected platform. The threat was still so real. As the soldiers are trying to get him up the steps to the barracks for safety, the mob is still surging forward. They're so violent that the soldiers literally have to pick Paul up and carry him just to protect him. And the whole time, the crowd is still screaming for his death. And yet, in the middle of all of this, Paul is completely composed. What he does next is just strategically brilliant. First, he totally surprises the Roman commander by speaking to him in fluent Greek. Second, he establishes his credibility. He's not just some troublemaker. He's a Jew from Tarsus, a citizen of no ordinary city. And then third, he makes the boldest request you could possibly imagine. Please, let me speak to the people.
This one quote from the commander tells you everything you need to know. He thought Paul was some infamous Egyptian terrorist who would lead a revolt. But the second Paul opened his mouth and spoke perfect Greek, that whole assumption was shattered. Paul's education, his background, it immediately set him apart and opened the door for a conversation, not just a prison cell.
So this is the turning point. Paul is about to transform his own arrest into a megaphone. He doesn't see this as a defeat. He sees it as a divinely given chance to share his message with the very people who, just minutes ago, were trying to kill him.
What an incredible image this is. The commander actually says yes. So Paul, a captive, stands there on the steps. He raises his hand, and that murderous, screaming mob falls completely silent. Just like that, he has their full attention. The entire dynamic has just been flipped on its head.
And here is the master stroke. He used Greek to speak to the Roman commander, right, to establish his intelligence and his credibility. But now, when he turns to the crowd, he speaks in Aramaic, their language, the language of their hearts. This was a massive sign of respect, of cultural connection. He was basically saying, hey, I'm one of you.
So what can we pull from Paul's example here? I mean, his actions give us this amazing template for our own lives. Stay composed when things get heated. Use what makes you unique, your background, your skills, as a way to build bridges. Correct lies with simple truth. Don't be afraid to boldly ask for a chance to speak. And when you get that chance, connect with people on their terms.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. Paul's story proves that a moment of intense opposition can actually become an incredible opportunity. So the question for all of us is, when we face our own trials, our own mobs, how can we, like Paul, find the courage and the wisdom to turn that danger into a platform?